Let's go.
My rocket
Okay.
fuel.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I think we're live. We got the boss man. We got the whiteboard out. I'm going to hop off here in a second. Let me just make sure everything, or just jump off the stage. Basically, we'll go through all the questions. We will try and prioritize all the in real life questions. So pop them in. We're on YouTube, Twitter's, LinkedIn. I'll be trying to monitor all the comments there. And then let me see here. Let me just get okay. We are live. We're live. One other thing too. These all of Rashib's Whiteboard Wednesdays are on our YouTube channel. So if you like this and you want to consume more, there's a whole playlist with all his post hoc brilliance. Without further ado, take it away, boss man.
Awesome. Oh, one other housekeeping item. Raba's going to try to
Yes.
keep me on 5 minutes per topic. 3 minutes, I will share my framework for how I think about a certain thing. And then 2 minutes, uh, hopefully, if you're watching this, you can ask some questions on that topic or ask to expound on a certain thing. Otherwise, that's what Rava's going to do. Rava's going to move it along, and then we're just going to move to the next one. So max of 5 minutes on any given topic, so that way we can just hit a bunch of things as quickly as possible.
Beautiful. All right. Take it away. The first topic.
Hiring. Okay, yeah, my favorite one. So uh, first of all, I think I'm going to just do one before, which is like hiring is probably one of the most important jobs for any founder or CEO. And everybody says they hire A plus talent. And I think that, so I'm not using A plus intentionally. So it's like, hey, what do you want to do in terms of hiring exceptional people? And which parts of your team do you actually need to hire exceptional people in? And then how do you incentivize that person to join? So I'm actually going to use Raba as a scapegoat since he's here and he sort of knows the story. But in my view, for Fermat, we had different phases in the company journey. So there was like the 0 to 1 phase, which was basically PMF, which is all about having the right founding team. Then there's the 1 to like 10 stage, which is where you need like an exceptional marketer. And the way I think about how to hire the best possible people is not to, inbound never works for the best people. It is always outbound driven. So it's like, who is the single best marketer for ecom SaaS in the world? And I start with that question, and then I ask if it's possible for me to get them. And then I do everything in my power to get that person. And then I just ask that person what it is that they want out of the role that excites them outside of compensation. Because comp is the easiest thing to give someone when they're looking to join a new role. And so generally, exceptional people have something else that they're trying to accomplish. So it's like, so first of all, again, you want to know what is the one place where you want to hire somebody truly exceptional. You want to ask, like, who is the best in the world, and you want to outbound them. You don't want to inbound them. And then the last thing you want to do is you want to ask them outside of comp what matters to you. And so, for example, I think one of the things that got Raba excited, and Raba can correct me, is like, hey, how do I do something that is going to truly transform the entire marketing ecosystem? And so for Fermat, like when he came in, he was like, how do I make everything a Fermat experience? Like the entire internet a Fermat experience, right? Or every link a Fermat link. And so for him, it was like big vision, and then the tools to actually accomplish that vision. And so generally, this is how I think about it. Which is the department that you want to drive leverage on? You need to outbound them by figuring out who is the best. And then you need to ask, what is it outside of comp that attracts that person? All right, I think that was 3 minutes.
That was pretty, man. Your internal clock is incredible. That is 2 minutes and 30 seconds for questions. If you guys have some questions, pop them in here. I guess my question to you, while we'll fill some time for this last segment, is: are there any red flags or green flags that you look for where you are? Because sometimes that quadrant that we always talk about, where there's basically like low performers, you don't need those. It's agency versus talent, and the frustrated geniuses can seem like very sexy hires, but they're usually always the worst. Do you have any thoughts there, or like how do you think of when you are meeting these people? Because one of the things that I found at Fermat was so crazy is the talent density and the lack of ego. Where I've been around a bunch of talented people, and there's just people that it's worth taking the crap kind of thing. I mean, obviously, like to a certain extent, but the talent's worth it. So that would be my
Yeah,
question.
yeah. I think roughly my framework for or how you can test for this in the hiring process is just one is like, so I always do two things. I always do like, how does the person respond to feedback? And then what do they do when you ask them for what is like the roadmap of what they're going to do once they join? And though, so like during the interview process or during the courting process, figure out how they respond to feedback. And then the second thing is figure out what it is that they want to do when they join. And if you can get very high clarity on what they want to do when they join, and you understand how they respond to feedback, it is very low likelihood that you end up with like a frustrated genius or a low performer, because the person is basically directly signing up for what it is they're going to do, and then they just go do it, right? So every hire, I mean, especially for the leadership team, every
Yeah.
hire that I make goes through this exercise, and so they know what they need to do when they sign up, and they are making a decision about whether they believe it is possible that they can accomplish those things, and then they actually talk to the other leaders to check whether they can get out of those other leaders the things that they need in order to accomplish their roadmap. And so you kind of like figure it out beforehand by having the
Yep.
exercise in the hiring process.
No, that's super, super helpful. One last thing, we'll tidy it up. Emmett has a really good question. Is ego worth dealing with?
No.
No.
It's just
Clear.
like, yeah, I mean, I think there's only one way to kill a high growth company. It's to hire a not high growth person.
Yeah.
And like ego is the antithesis of growth.
Yeah.
So like, it's like the single thing to make sure that you are avoiding. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you for the question, Emmett. All right. Next one. You are in the epicenter of VC. There's no New York. There's no Texas. There's no Chicago. There's no Miami. There's no London. How do you approach fundraising?
Yeah. Okay. So this is my framework for this, I think, is actually, when I say it out loud, it's completely unsurprising, but for some reason it's a thing that very few people do. So here is how people think they should fundraise. They think they need to like build a deck and then like send the deck to people. And then they think that that deck needs to have a certain format, which is like, problem, solution, opportunity, team, yada, yada, yada. And I think like this is entirely wrong, in my opinion. And I think instead you need to like view it like an enterprise sale. And the moment you do that, actually, everybody is better off, including the VCs, right? So instead of following this sort of very linear way of thinking about fundraising, start with what would get an investor excited about owning a part of this company. So let's just say you're going to raise your Series A. It's like, okay, what is a Series A investor? And then don't even do it at like that high of a level. Like name the three people. So it's like, Bob and Kate and Peter. Like, what is it that gets these three people excited about owning a piece of a Series A company? Once you know that, first of all, you should like figure out a way to validate whether or not that's true.
Yep.
So use your network to figure out whether or not that's true, and then work backwards from that to start to like drop hints to these people. Just like how for Fermat, we like drop content and drop other, warm up your buyer. So warm up your buyer saying like, hey, Fermat is a company that has the components that you guys are looking for before they ever talk to you. And then when you are ready to talk to them, you get a warm introduction through somebody they trust. Exactly the same you would do with enterprise sales. Is like get another customer to refer you, right? And then you can have the conversation cater to the thing that they actually care about, and don't build your deck in this way. Build your deck on the thing that that person cares about. And then you are way more likely to have a successful fundraising process. And then there's a bunch of other details about actual process itself. But from a high level, I think this meta point is the single most important thing that a lot of people who have not fundraised often get wrong.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Man, you are, you don't even need me. You're a human metronome over there. One, have to give a shout out to my boy, Chase. Him and his wife brought in a beautiful baby girl earlier today. So congrats to Chase, and also his same pat leave status as Rashib's supposed to be on pat leave, and Chase is sitting and watching live streams. But you guys are wonderful humans. I guess the thing I would ask about fundraising is, um, when I was a kid, my mom would take me shoe shopping, and she would never let me buy the first pair of shoes. Right then, she'd make me at least like try on 2 or 3 pairs. I could buy the first pair of shoes, but I couldn't buy the first pair of shoes I tried on, if that makes sense. Is there something to that with fundraising? Like, is it worth shopping, bidding war, getting people like talking, interested in you, or do you, if you just get a great term sheet on the first go, do you just rip that?
Okay. I think if you're a founder CEO, as the CEO, it is your job to maximize the value of the company. Okay, that is the job of the CEO.
Yep.
And that means that when you are fundraising, you are not doing your job if you do not create enough of a market to understand the value of the company or what somebody is willing to pay for the company.
Yep.
So I don't view it as playing a game. I view it as doing the job of the CEO.
Yep.
And I do think it's super important to create as much of a competitive market as possible. And I think you should do it very openly. So let's just say there is an investor who you love. You should tell that investor that very directly. I love you, Kate. I want to partner with you in this next round, but I would be negligent in my job as CEO if I do not go and find the market price for this company. And
Yep.
you, if you were already in this company, would want me to do the same thing for our next round. And so let's agree that that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And speaking of fiduciary responsibility, we got to keep the burn low, Ron. We got to keep the burn low. Maybe at the B we'll get Rashib a 4K camera, but our buddies from over at Avi killing it as always. Okay, this is great.
Ron would. I'm embarrassed to show Ron the setup right now. I have 3 inverted pots stacked on each other to like hold the laptop, and then the mic and the audio is literally my running headphones.
It's
so
it's amazing.
Yeah, dude, we gotta, you know,
it's raw. It's raw.
exactly.
It's real. Okay, moving on to the next one. How do the fastest growing D2C brands approach experimentation? And the other thing I'd like to kind of let people know, if they're not familiar, is you come from a very heavy academic and scientific method background, and then also a bunch of economic chops from UPenn Wharton. So this is going to be really interesting because there is a real, like, sometimes not distance, but I feel like there's marketing experimentation and then like GLP-1 experimentation, where it's like you really need to make sure you don't kill somebody, versus marketing. I feel like there's different approaches to it. So with that being said, take it away.
Yeah. So this is true for the fastest growing D2C brands, and it's just true for any well-run business or fast-growing businesses. Every fast-growing business knows what their business formula is and knows what the point of leverage is, and then drives experiments at the point of leverage. So I'm going to use D2C as an example in particular for this. So let's just say, for most D2C businesses, this is true, and then we can talk about examples where it may not be. But for most D2C businesses, the engine runs on new customer acquisition. Okay, so it's like new customer acquisition, and then that then leads to LTV of the customer, and it's like a reasonably simple formula. the new customer acquisition, the funnel is basically like my impressions, and then my conversion rate after the impression. So this is like the intent of the impression. And so what you will hear often is, hey, I am doing a lot. By the way, the way you used to do the impression and the intent of the impression was audience testing. So it was like, okay, the best way for me to drive the highest intent new impressions is feeding Meta, for example, what my existing customers look like. Because if I do that, I'm going to get the highest intent new impressions. And then also like audiences that you think are going to be high affinity for your product. So if you're selling something health related, then you do audiences that have interest in health. That stopped when you could no longer send that signal back because of ATT. And then it became creative testing, right? So creative testing. And so what the fastest growing D2C brands are able to do, the first thing they did is like, okay, I need to increase the variance and the quantity of my creative testing in order to unlock those new audiences, to find the high intent audiences that I can then bring into my funnel. The second part of what the fastest growing D2C brands are doing is like, great, now I am bringing them to me, my website, my format funnel, whatever it is. How do I drive the highest possible conversion once they land here? And so then here, what people are doing is a lot of like funnel testing, basically. And that funnel testing can take various formats. It can take like unique funnels for the ad, like what Format does. It can take the version of CRO. So I hire a CRO agency and I figure out with them, like, okay, what is the best way to drive new customers? It can take various formats. And Cody Plofker mentioned this a couple of weeks ago in his newsletter, but he has shared publicly that Jones Road is now switching a lot of their experimentation into the funnel on the post click, because I mean, he's already excellent at creative testing. And so it's again, but it starts with the business formula. So like, what is the business formula? If it's a new customer acquisition based business, which is what most of D2C is, then it's creative testing and then funnel testing, and that's where you're going to get the highest leverage.
I love that. I love that. Any questions out there? Pop them in. We got like 30 seconds left. How do you think of, I guess, results versus directionality? We can end on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay. If I'm understanding the question directly, what you're asking is like, hey, you're starting to see progress, but you're not yet at the place where you want to be. Is that right?
Well, I guess to say it a different way, there's so many people that bang the drum on statistical significance versus, for me, directionality. So it's like, when do you call a winner kind of thing? Because I think people, again, we're not making medical equipment here or lasers. It's like, if something, I joked, like, do you want to be right or do you want to make money?
Yeah. Dude, okay. So, I mean, this is just me, but I understand this is going to be controversial. I think people use stat-sig as a way to cover their ass on decision.
Yep. Same.
I do not think that it is the right way to make a decision. Okay. I genuinely believe that the right way to make a decision is you can see what's working and you have enough information to then drive better experiments, to then move the needle such a large amount that the stat-sig number is irrelevant anyway.
Yep.
And so that is the right way to do experiments, is like, how do I drive massive leverage? Not, hey, this thing was 10%, the traditional A/B testing of this thing was 10% better and it was stat-sig that was true. That's why I made that decision. That's a good way to get nowhere, basically.
Yeah. No, really well said. Okay, we have a couple coming in from LinkedIn, and I saw you, Emmett. I'll get you in after these two questions from Jamal Mehdi. So the first one is, what have been some major inflection points where you had to shift your mindset and priorities as you have built Format?
Oh, wow. Okay, so inflections. Okay, got it. So I think about inflections as moments in time where the business is actually meaningfully changing what its core operating principle is. And this is a great question because Format is going through one of those like right now.
Yep.
And so, but for most, I'll talk about SaaS and then I'll talk about D2C, and there's equivalents. So in SaaS, like the basic rules of thumb are like, okay, 0 to 1, 1 to 5, 5 to 15, 15 to 50, 50 to 100. This is all in revenue, and then like 100 to multi-hundred, okay, in revenue. And at each one of these stages is when the business is inflecting, because you're fundamentally trying to optimize for a completely different thing. So here it's product market fit. Here it's sales and marketing. Here it's customer success, because basically like in this zone is where your customers are basically driving the majority of the growth, either directly or indirectly. And then once you get to here, you need to have product 2 ready. So it's like a very common rule of thumb is by the time you hit 100 million in ARR, you want to have product 2 ready in order to become a multi-$100 million business. And so what you focus on, how the team orients, how the team is organized, everything changes at each one of these inflection points. And so the way I think about it is like the job is really only like 2 things. It's to recognize the inflection and then to communicate about it. Because you've got to bring people along the journey with you. Otherwise, people feel left behind. They feel confused. They think you don't know what you're doing. And so those are like the 2 things I would say about inflections, and then how you need to change. Now for D2C, the numbers are slightly different because you actually have to be at higher scale in D2C, generally speaking. But an example of something that is very, very common in D2C is you can get to your first, call it like 10 million of revenue,
Yep.
Entirely off of like Meta ads and Google, basically. Right? So it's like 2 channels. And the types of expertise you need in order to get to this is very different than the like 10 to $100 million business where you become truly omni-channel. You're doing so you have to be better at measurement. You have to add net new capabilities to the organization and hire those net new capabilities into the organization. And again, you've got to bring people along the ride with you, because it's going to feel like you're doing things that don't make sense, because people are going to be like, wait a second, but like Meta is amazing. And you're like, yes, Meta's amazing. We're not going to get, I mean, maybe you can, but generally you're not going to get to $100 million of revenue off of Meta alone, right? And so that is like the types of stuff that you need to deal with as you're growing, and what the inflections look like.
Yeah, totally. And I think the one caveat there is D2C is atoms and SaaS is normally bits, where SaaS doesn't have inventory issues, where D2C brands, if you outshoot your demand supply curves and you have all this demand but can't satiate the supply, I think going from like 20 to 100 is usually the hardest in D2C, because you found this demand engine, but now you can't service the supply. And you say this as well in SaaS, where you know, building the demand for your service is not the same muscle as servicing that demand. And I think if you have if your sales and marketing is too strong, but your product or your, customer success team isn't where it's at, like matching that equilibrium, and then maybe having just a little bit more demand than supply can really help get through some really tough valleys, because when those get mismatched, especially with demand, because you're actually winning, but you can't satiate the supply, it can be very challenging.
Yeah, totally. I think for a lot, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of detail in there that I'm sure the D2C operators are thinking about as you were saying that. It's like, do I have to switch my supplier? What do I need to bring in how? It's just like everything about the business changes when you're in that inflection. But yeah, that you're exactly right. That's exactly how we need to be thinking about inflections, is like, is the business actually changing?
Okay, right off the back of that, and perfect segue is, how do you think about product expansion? How do you drive an inflection point through product?
Yeah. Okay, so product expansion.
These were great questions, by the way, Jamal. If you're out there listening, thank you for submitting.
Okay. So I shared a little bit about like in SaaS, when do you need product two to be ready?
Mhm.
So I'll talk about it from both the sort of like net new product standpoint and the adjacent product standpoint. But I heard somebody give this framework, which is, hey, like you can get from 0 to 100 on essentially one product. Now, of course, that one product has like a lot of features, and then the 100 to a billion is a multi-product company, right? Uh, Now, the insight actually is that product two needs to be bigger than product one, and this is the key insight. And when I heard this, it makes a lot of sense, because if you start with like, oh, here's this other product we could build, it's sort of interesting, but it's actually smaller than your first product, the probability that it is going to make an impact to get to the next level is actually very low. But if you start with something that's significantly bigger than the first product, and then you attach the risk of everything that is normal, which is how does it work, how competitive is the ecosystem, all that sort of stuff, then you have a real shot of actually getting to the next phase of the business. And a good example of this that someone highlighted was HubSpot, where
Yeah.
the marketing product was actually a smaller product than CRM. CRM didn't exist for the first 6 years of the company.
Yep.
And now it's the majority of the revenue, right?
Yeah.
And so even in D2C, I would actually push the idea that it is probably similar in D2C, where you don't like your first product or your first set of product categories and the adjacencies around that product can take you to your first sort of level of success. But then after that, you actually want to expand into a category that is bigger than the first category in which you won. And I think that's when you become a truly multi-product, large, independent, durable company. Or that's also why it's very common that this 100 million mark in D2C is where a lot of acquisitions happen.
Yep.
And you get acquired into a strategic that has a multi-product portfolio. And
Yeah.
so that is like roughly how I would think about product expansion, and like how to be strategic about what types of second products are actually good second products.
So let me push back a little bit, or not push back, but give you more of a
Yeah,
bits or atoms versus bits. Like the iPhone will never be supplanted. It was the most successful product ever of all time.
totally.
So
That's
is that
exactly
more
right.
just like an exception that proves the rule kind of thing? Because they started with computer, and then the second product was bigger, and then they actually developed the iPad first, and then they realized, oh my gosh, if we miniaturize this into a phone, this is game on. And to be fair, that was the inflection of the company, and they built a whole. I mean, AirPods by itself, like, is just you would love that as its own business, and this is a business line at the company. And so I thought it was interesting how they weren't scared to cannibalize their previous products.
That's exactly right. I think mobile became a bigger business than PC. I think when they released the iPad, it would not surprise me if internally they said that the iPad has an opportunity to be bigger than the iPhone.
Yep.
And again, that's where the risk comes in. It's like the
Yep.
way it played out is that the iPhone was still the biggest product.
Yep.
But you can see that the things that they release are things that they believe are going to be the next new platform that they think have an opportunity to be absolutely massive, right? And so the thing again, the Vision Pro did not take off yet, right?
We have it.
But
Yeah.
but I don't think that they worked on that, or they worked on the car initiative thinking that
Right.
it's going to be smaller than the phone market.
Yeah. Well, and what's also interesting, to be fair, is Apple does a really good job of bolting on these just like tiny subscriptions that you don't care about. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh, I'm paying Apple $50 a month for iCloud storage, for this, for that. And like, oh, you want to get a fancier camera? It's going to be bigger size pictures. And then I got to get a fancier phone. So, but that was my only product two, product three thing, because I think there's some times where you're never going to be able to replicate a certain amount of success. But that's when, in my opinion, you can start making an ecosystem and you just bolt things on. Because that's why, that's why I have a Mac. That's why I have an iPhone. That's why I have AirPods. That's why I have all these things that might not be quote unquote the best, but they just all work together, and you start to get this really symbiotic relationship. And Apple does a great job of doing proprietary stuff where you can't do these cool things unless you have an Apple product. And the blue message, but the blue bubble is one of the best branding decisions ever. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's also true. I mean, Apple also, the great irony of Apple is that one of their fastest growing businesses is their ads business. So, I mean, we all know that Apple basically like is the reason why we got completely demolished on CACs on Facebook, but it's also their ads business is massive. And so they do have like a next act coming in their ads business, just like with Amazon. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah, Amazon's ad business is atrociously big and arguably way deeper funnel than everything else. Okay, cool. Next topic from Emmett. Can you grow without ads?
Okay. That's not okay. I'm gonna try my best to make sure I understand the question. So I'm just gonna assume we're talking about D2C.
Yep.
And I think it's possible. Yeah, exactly.
Clarifications in here if needed.
Yeah, but I think you can always grow organically. I just think it's going to take way longer.
Yeah.
So like you really only have two things. It's like you have like time or you have money, and then so basically like low on time, high on money. That's like you just run inorganic, you run ads. High on time, low on money, you just sort of like slowly wait for your organic work to, which is still a real investment, but organic work to pay off, right? But that's like roughly the thing that you need to think about is like an ad ultimately is a way to pay for media, right? And so I think that I think it's possible. I think it is very expensive in time. And I also think that ads are one of the single best ways to experiment at high velocity. So you can like show your concepts to people very fast, even actually without a product, and see if it resonates. And it's like one of the cheapest ways to figure out if your message is resonating with people and whether it's even worth investing in something before you try to like make it, much less sell it. So yeah, generally, I mean, like, yes, it is possible in theory, but I personally, I would like strongly advise against it. So
yeah. And I think I'm pretty aligned there. I think for me, I see ads as an accelerant or like fuel. And I think you need a fire first. And you need 100. There's a great Kevin Kelly essay, 1,000 True Fans. I think the goal of everyone's starting out should be, okay, cool. Can I get 100 people or 500 people to be an evangelist of my brand? Okay, cool. And then now I can have this little fire burn and I can put gasoline on it. But if you don't have a fire, the days of just throwing gasoline out there, like, because that's when I came up was I could put $1 into the Facebook machine and 4 would just magically come out. And you're just like, oh man, this is amazing. MVMT, there's a lot of brands that were really just built off the back of paid, where now I think you really need to have a product, a market, and understand the value you're generating. And then you can use ads to your point, add velocity, but I don't think you can use ads to combat inertia, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. I think you can only do it for two things. You can only use ads for two things: do discovery and add fuel. Yep. So like a good example of do discovery is like a DPA ad, or like what Wish did, which is like you don't know which product is going to resonate the most. And so you just like see which one resonates the most. So that's like the do discovery. Or yeah, you add fuel to a fire.
What? I can't remember if it was Harry's or somebody, but there was a bigger brand that was using it basically as product research, where they would spin up a basically dummy product, or not dummy product, but like a mock-up essentially, and they would see how many people would pre-order it, and then that would kind of help navigate some of their demand theses around the products they should create. So yeah, totally tracking there. Thanks for the question, Emmett. Big fan of yours. Okay, Rashib, I'd love to hear about scaling challenges at Firma and how you've managed them. Okay. And this was from, I'm sorry if I butcher your name. Oh, Jake. Yevgeny, I think, from LinkedIn.
Yeah. So the best framework I have on scaling is like the rules of three. So yeah, Rob, I'm actually curious if you've heard this one before, but basically like the one of the hardest parts of scaling is scaling people. And generally it's like rules of three that things change very dramatically. So like most companies start with just like, you know, the founders, it's like a handful of people. So you're all very, very aware of what everybody else is doing. You like operate like, you know, one organism basically. And it's like super easy to like get things done. And then at 10, you still know everybody, right? So it's like, okay, you know everybody, but you don't have to do everything because now you have enough people that you can like divvy up their responsibilities in some reasonable way. And so what you can do is you can just like the way you operate changes because it's like, hey, there's this task. I'm not going to touch it. Somebody else is going to do it. At 30, you don't know what everybody's doing. So all of a sudden you have to switch how you operate again. And you're like, okay, now tasks are being divvied and people are not all next to each other. I don't know what everybody is doing. And so you just kind of have to trust and have systems that are good enough that people are actually doing the right things with their time. At 100, not only do you not know what people are doing, you don't know everybody. So it's like, and you know, format is like in between these right now. So it's like, not only do I not know what you're doing, like, I mean, I know what most people are doing, but like, if you're a person inside of our company, you don't know on average what the like other person in the other department is doing. You just
Right.
don't. And so this is like a totally different like set of problems where you really need to be able to communicate what people are doing, why they're doing it, what is important, and most importantly, communicate to people that they need a framework in their heads that, hey, if I do X, it is actually moving the ball forward. At 300, even like the leadership doesn't know everybody and doesn't interview everybody. And so now you have to really trust culture scale. And then at 1,000, you know, you're at a system where not only does you have to trust culture scale, but you have to trust process scale.
Yeah.
So those are like roughly, it's like somehow it always works out as like a rule of three. And these are like roughly the ways I would think about it.
No, I love that. And I haven't heard of this in the numerical sense, but in the, I love stories. Basically, you start out as these hunter gatherers and you're nomadic. Everybody knows everybody. Like everybody usually can wear multiple hats. Okay. One person's hunting, the other person's gathering, the other person's field dressing, the hunt, whatever. And then okay, cool, now we're in a village. Okay, cool, this village is great, blah blah blah, and all these things. And then you scale up to a small town, and then you scale up to a small village, like city. And then as you go through, you need things that you previously didn't. And so it just starts to just change the culture, or not change the culture, but the culture is a function of the people. And so as you get more and more people in that are like, when the inflection of new people start to outnumber old people, you can start to get a battle for the culture per se, or there's this vacuum of like who's setting the tone. So yeah, this is really interesting. I've never seen it plotted out in the numbers, but the thesis and concept is familiar.
That's awesome. Yeah,
I love it.
we're learning too as we do this, so this is fun.
I love it. Okay, I'm actually sneaking one in here. I have two more for you. Then, if you all have any other questions, drop in the comments. Um, are there any companies you use as a muse? And if yes, what companies and why?
Oh man, I love this question. Okay, so first of all, I think that everybody should have like companies they look up to, companies to admire. And the reason for this is that depending on the type of business that you're trying to build, there should be like 2 or 3 companies from whom you draw inspiration on a variety of different axes. And so for me, the ones that I have are, and I'll explain why, are Shopify, and I'll explain how I got to these. Shopify, Meta, and Booking.com. Booking. And so the first question is like, okay, what is the type of company that you want to build? And so I was like, okay, I want to build a large platform company. And I view Shopify as having built an exceptional platform because they
Yep.
allow companies like us to exist and a bunch of other companies like Klaviyo, like Attentive, like Post, they have truly built a platform on which many, many people win, right?
Yep.
And so, okay, so it's like, what is the type of company? And then what did they do right that you can learn from, right? And so there's lots of stories that I take from Shopify, especially from their early days of like how the early platform got developed was basically themes. So the very first thing that they quote unquote outsourced was the development of themes for the front end UI. Excuse me, for the front end UI, which is how Andrew Wilkinson, who runs another company called TinyCo, became big, is because he built themes on Shopify, right? So anyway, there's like things you can learn from like the very early days when you see these like large platforms.
Yep.
The second one is Meta, and the thing that I draw inspiration from Meta is they are exceptional at like being adaptive.
Yep.
So like for me, it was like I want to build a highly adaptive company, and I cannot think of a company that is more adaptive than Meta. They did it organically and inorganically in the right times. They bought the right companies.
Oh.
They navigated ATT exceptionally well. They made adjustments to their product. Very adaptive. And again, lots of things underneath that for why they are able to be that adaptive. But I draw lots of inspiration. And then the last one is like, what is a company out there that has like a secret weapon? So this is like a secret weapon that most people don't even understand. And that's booking.com. And booking.com's secret weapon that most people don't understand is they have like a CRO engine underneath the website that drives better conversion rate than any other booking website on the planet by like a factor of 3. And that has compounded in absolutely ridiculous ways in terms of enterprise value to the company over time. And so I think that at least, for Fermat and certainly for others, every company should have a secret that nobody else actually fully understands. Like, why is this thing so amazing? Now, the customer value needs to be very clear, but there does need to be an underlying secret that drives significant outperformance relative to anybody else who may try to compete. So those are like the things that I think about when I think about muses.
Yeah, I love. I mean, all have. I'm not familiar. Let me look it up. What's the ticker? BKNG.
Yeah.
Are they ripping?
Yeah.
I mean, last 5 years up 100% or 95%. Not horrible.
Yeah, but I mean, look at
in the
the
same
history.
class as Shopify or Meta though, in terms of stock performance for the last 5 years, but it's still really cool.
No, but look at the history of the stock performance from when it went public to now.
Oh, okay, up 700%. But to be fair, this was in this. Oh my gosh, you're showing your age. I'm older than you. This is it was founded in '99. Holy smokes!
Yeah, and it's
That's
just been
wild.
slowly compounding, right?
That's
Yeah.
pretty. I mean, yeah, that's ripping. That is absolutely ripping. I'm surprised so no Airbnb on there.
No, Airbnb to me, actually, you know what? I
Chesky's
use?
killer.
Oh, I mean, he is a founder to be admired.
Yes.
Not a company to be admired, in my opinion.
Oh, let's. That's a good follow on. Do you have any like founders as muses? I'm gonna add that. It's such a good follow on.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think about like founders to admire based again on specific things that I want to learn from them. And so the reason I think Brian Chesky is someone to learn from is because of like how he navigated a like bad situation. So when the stock price dropped 80%, right? So founders to admire. So one is like, how do they basically how do they navigate wartime?
Yes.
How do they navigate peacetime? And then did they do right by all the stakeholders? where doing right by all the stakeholders means investors, customers, and
employees.
employees, partners, everybody. Yeah. And so those are like the things that I think that I look for inspiration from people who are like how do I make everybody win? How do I navigate really bad times? And then how do I operate in good times? And so I think like Brian Chesky is one of the best wartime CEOs. I think Jeff Weiner from LinkedIn is one of the best peacetime CEOs.
Yep.
And then I think in terms of like, how do I enrich everybody? I actually think Toby Lucky is one of the best at that.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. I mean,
he's very principled. Yeah, he's very principled. Now, I know people like will like comment on like one or two actions that Shopify has taken over time as like, oh, this was like not good for partners, or this was not, I genuinely think it's like, look, ultimately it's a big organization. There are VPs who are compensated in certain ways. They're going to make the decisions they're going to make in order to like, increase their comp. But I bet you if you were to ask like Toby the question, he would actually have like a very principled answer for how to maximize the value for all stakeholders.
Yeah, and I think they did the same thing with kind of peak Facebook. Well, I mean, I guess there's been multiple peaks with Facebook, but pre-Zuckerberg glow up, you had Zuckerberg and then Sheryl Sandberg, which we have Toby and Harley. And so that person that you can parade out in front, or parade sounds like a pejorative, but that person that you can put in pretty much any room that's just super likable, really well spoken. And then you have, these people that are very technical, and sometimes when you're technical, you come across as, poignant or a little bit aggressive when you're just direct because you're in engineering, you know what I mean? So those are great picks. I think Tim Cook has to be in that combo too for me. I mean, what he's done with Apple in terms of the logistics of just taking that company on a rocket ship has been really, really interesting. Satya as well. I mean, Microsoft, what a glow up that is. He's
dude, you keep switching the criteria. These people are not.
No. I'm just pontificating. You're just opening.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
like
dude, totally.
The stage, and it matters at the stage of the CEO, like what their company's at. Because I found sometimes like what was his name? I forget the guy's name, but he came from pennies to go do all the Apple stores. And it was just such an atrocious mismatch because he was about discounting and pricing and stuff like, dude, like we're like a Bergdorf Goldman, or like we're like a Saks Fifth Ave, not a JC Penney. We don't do that here. And it just was, I think, a 6 or 8 under a year hire for an executive is frankly a miss. I think 4 months in, they know, and they just, you know what I mean? They're like, hey, I'm going to go spend some more time with my wife and kids, because you don't make those decisions lightly. And that's interesting tidbit. I've been very pro Apple, or heavy on the Apple history. I don't know what's going on with me. It's definitely a company to be admired, in my opinion. There's a lot of the Isaacson book on Jobs is a great read. Okay, we have another comment in here. Okay. Oh yeah, Whitney Wolf, Susan Wojcicki's, and Katrina Lake, absolutely. The gal she's back at Stitch Fix, I believe, as well. And that's an interesting thing when founders leave a little too early, in my opinion, and things happen. Because I used to be a big Stitch Fix guy, and it just fell apart. It was terrible.
Totally. You want to know who my female founder pick would be? Oh my god, I'm blanking now. The woman who's on Shark Tank.
Curie. Mary Curie, Sarah. Oh my gosh, she's like a quasi friend. She's awesome. Sarah Moret. Right, I'm gonna put your last name. Sarah Moret.
No, the woman who invested in her, the real estate woman. I cannot believe I'm blanking on her name. This is embarrassing. Oh my gosh. But yeah, she. This is gonna kill me.
The gals at Figs were also super impressive, even though I lost a ton of money in that stock, but they built a really interesting business. But yeah, because Susan Wojcicki went over to
Barbara Corcoran.
the other one.
I cannot believe myself.
2013.
Barbara Corcoran. Barbara Corcoran
Oh
is what I
yeah,
was
yeah,
thinking
yeah, yeah.
about, which is I cannot believe it. So, anyways, I listened to this podcast with Barbara Corcoran and Tim Ferriss, and you listen to her early stories as she was building up her real estate empire, and it is unreal. Like I highly recommend this episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast for anybody who's listening, with Barbara Corcoran. Uh, amazing, amazing. Like her tenacity is something to be admired. Yeah.
So I'll give you guys a little tidbit on super powerful women. I got to see the oldest university in the world, which is in Fez, Morocco, and it was founded by a rich woman, which is pretty interesting. Older than Cambridge, older than Oxford, oldest university in the world. It was pretty really actually cool. And then once the French took over, then they took out kind of the sciences and arts and put those in the French universities. But pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Juliana, thank you for calling us out. And those are some great picks. Okay, let's see. What other questions do we have? I think we've got one more and then we could start wrapping up. This is more so off the heels of we're starting a book club in our leadership. And so for people out there, do you have any like seminal reads that you just or always recommend or buy around either business, leadership, life, innovation, any things that kind of lightning strike books, if you will?
Yeah, totally, totally. So for whatever reason, there was like a 1.5 year period at the company that I used to work at called LabRam, where I probably read like 200 business and biography books in the course of 70 weeks. So probably like 3 books a week. So unfortunately, I have a lot of opinions on this topic. I would say that like there's one author, so Andy Grove, who
Of
wrote
course.
both Only the Paranoid Survive
Oh,
and High Output Management, that are
Intel
like must
fame.
reads.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are must reads for anybody who is in like management or leadership that are just like very clear systems for how to think about how to think about a business. And then I think the one that is not a business book, but is one of the ones that has most inspired my view of like leadership and what outstanding leadership looks like is Long Walk to Freedom. So Nelson Mandela's autobiography. It's not for the faint of heart. It's like a big book. So it's probably like 1,500 pages or something like that. So, but it's an exceptional read, truly exceptional read. And then I would say that the last book that I would recommend for anybody who's like a manager is called Multipliers.
Yep.
And it talks a lot about how to think about what is your impact as a manager or as a leader in an organization. So
Yeah, those are sensational picks. If you guys do like crazy biographies, there's a really amazing, not necessarily a biography as much as a biography of this trip, but there's a great book about Theodore Roosevelt going down the Amazon River after his presidency. It's sensational. Now I'm blanking on the name. River of Doubt. That's what it's called. River of Doubt. Really, really fun read. And Teddy Roosevelt was a really interesting, super interesting human. Okay, last one. Unless anybody has any in the comments, toss them in there, and then the last one will be kind of cheesy, but you know, I'm a little bit hippy dippy. Like, what's the worst piece of advice and best piece of advice you've ever received? And what would you, I guess, you have such a storied academic background, but if you were to start today and you know, from clean slate, young gun, Rashib, what would you be working on and investing in? Would it be AI? Would it be, I think AI and biology is going to get really interesting. If I was going to start over again, if I was 16 or 18, that'd be my bet.
yeah, so I think everybody has a story about like a moment that they had with someone else that changed the way they view things. So
Yes.
I have 2 of those. So one was when I was working at Morgan Stanley in 2008, and the VP on the desk, I was in investment banking, and the VP on the desk said to me, Rishabh, perception is reality.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like a hardcore, like, no, what's real is real, what's not
Yes.
real is not real. And I was like like, one of those types of people who didn't understand the value of like, what does the other person think?
Yes.
Or what is the other person perceiving? And it was like years later that I finally understood it. And it's like one of those sentences that was said to me that at the time I hated, and it's like now one of the things I say the most often to other people, because it's just so true.
Yep.
So that was one, and then the other one actually is when I was doing my PhD, Brian Halligan taught a class on entrepreneurship at the university, and so he actually did these one-on-one sessions where you would pitch him your idea and things like that. And so one of the times that I did that, he said, like, Rishabh, you have this like nervous energy that is very off-putting. And I hated it. But he was right? And it's like, guess what? I just had to become a better storyteller and presenter and all these sorts of things. And again, it was one of those moments that I'll never forget. But
yeah,
those two people like were kind enough to say the thing that was real to me at that moment in time, and therefore are the lessons that have stuck with me the most, the most deeply, basically. And then I'll very quickly answer the last question, which is like, what would I do if I was younger at this time? I mean, this is going to sound stupid, but the main thing I would do is go work for someone you admire. That is like the single best thing that you can do, because then you'll just learn an incredible amount from that person, figure out a way to work for them, and then leave after 2 years once you've learned whatever you wanted to learn.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, you're not alone. Juliana, I guess, has a little bit of nervous energy as well, so you're in good company. Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for joining the stream. This has been a lot of fun. Go check out firmoutcommerce.com. Go book you a demo. Go make the money printer go burr. Create some satellites, sites, some funnels, do some testing, do all the things. And then we also have a really awesome newsletter that goes out every Monday called The Geometry of Growth. You can sign up right on the website. And then Rishabh's on all the socials. His LinkedIn and Twitter are actually really, really fun follows. And then if you enjoyed this and you just want to hear more pontificating from Rishabh on kind of like 3 to 5 minute clips for the Whiteboard Wednesdays that he does, follow him on LinkedIn, and then you can see the whole backlog on our YouTube catalog. Anything else for the people?
We got it. If this was actually interesting, we may do it again. I don't promise. This was a little bit of an experiment. We love experimenting. This is an experiment.
Ooh,
so
look at that. Nice segue.
But if it ended up being valuable to people, we'll think about doing it again, and maybe we'll switch up the format in a way in which makes it a little bit more interactive. We'll think about how to do that. So awesome.
Amazing. Yeah. So ping us on all the socials and we'll make this more better for you, because we are here for you. Men of the people, people of the people. Boss man, thank you so much for carving out the time. And then we'll see everybody later. And then actually, if you want a shameless plug, new Equation of Excellence just dropped with Dan Pintello at Marpipe. If you're interested in hearing about all things DPA and hearing from like a 3-year-old killer. I forget how young that guy is. It's crazy. I was just rampaging the Midwest in my 20s, and this guy's building SaaS kingdoms. So hey,
here we are with white beards, and
we're white beards now.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. That's all we got. Bye-bye.